I'd like to call this Urbana City Council meeting to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Here.
Mr. Brown? Here. Mr. Jacobson?
Here.
Mr. Madigan?
Here.
Ms. Marlin?
Here.
Mr. Roberts?
Here.
Mr. Smythe?
Here.
Mayor Pressing.
Okay, we have minutes from our special meeting of January 13, 2014. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
I'll second.
Moved by Carol, seconded by Dennis. Any discussion? Any corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Are there any additions to the agenda? Are there anybody petitioning the council at this time? I don't have any slips of paper. Okay. Reverend Dr. Evelyn B. Underwood and Bishop King James Underwood don't wish to speak, but they're still concerned about the sewer problem in their neighborhood. Okay, moving on, we have Mike Munson wanted to have a word. Mike?
Talked to the mayor this afternoon. She's sorry she can't be here for tonight's meeting. She's attending the U.S. Conference of Mayors meeting in Washington, D.C. this week. She and other mayors will be meeting with President Obama at the White House either this week, and she'll be bringing up the issue of hospital taxation and how hospitals should pay their fair share of taxes at that meeting.
Okay, and hence that's why I'm sitting here in her stead. Next up is unfinished business. We have resolution number 2014-01-022-002R, resolution authorizing the creation of a task force to recommend how the city can improve understanding of data compiled in the IDOT traffic study and respond to concerns raised by social justice organizations. Diane.
I'll move approval of this resolution for the purposes of discussion.
Point of order, I think we need to move to consider the resolution first, since it wasn't forwarded from committee of the whole. So I'll move to consider.
Actually, it was. It was committee, council, as I recall. But anyway, which you want to move consideration of the resolution? It doesn't matter.
I would move to do that, yeah.
Yeah, I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to consider this resolution. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And we did have a version that we sent from last week.
We did.
Yes.
And so
And
we need a motion to put that on the floor in some version.
So moved, and there are several amendments to that. So
Okay, there's a motion to adopt the resolution as was sent from last week.
with as amended, which we'll be discussing. So
Okay, we have several versions in front of us. There's a version on the desk with red and blue on it. Is this the
Right.
version you're
Yes.
referring to?
Yes.
Okay. So,
and I would like to second the motion.
okay, it's been moved and seconded to consider the resolution with the red and blue amendments on and I will indicate which ones those are. Okay, there is a whereas that was sent from last week. The whereas on the first page, the city takes seriously the intent embodied in its human rights ordinance to end discrimination, recognize the potential for discrimination in routine policing activities, and strives to prevent discrimination. On page 2, there's the insertion and to allow for comparisons and alternate analyses that was discussed last week. The mayor has done a slight word change to the last sentence in that paragraph and now reads, for additional social context, the task force will consider the experience of traffic stops from the perspective of minority drivers. In section 3, Appointments to the task force and selection of a chair will be made by the mayor with the approval of the city council. And then in section 5, the mayor and city council may submit questions to be researched by the task force. And then section 6 has the read from last week. The task force will report preliminary findings, including any policy recommendations, in writing on or before April 30, 2015. Mike.
In section 2, that added sentence at the bottom was suggested by Bill Brown, and the mayor supports it.
Okay. So that's what's before us. I've received 2 cards here from the public, I assume to speak to this. So why don't we take those now? Martell Miller. And you have 5 minutes, Mr. Miller.
Martell Miller, General Delivery. What I want to speak to is how the people are going to be selected. I know the mayor is picking the people, but I think she ought to look at some of the people that came in and brought this to Urbana City Council, especially dealing with what's happening with the African American community. It hadn't happened with other communities, and these people have always been involved with things happening to the African community, like the Women Legal Voters, Ministers Alliance, NAACP, People for Citizen Justice of Peace. I say they would have like the expertise in what's going on in the community that we've been dealing with, the things that we see that come to us, instead of electing some people that haven't been involved and have to do catching up, and we only got a year for it. I think the city council ought to really look at that. I know the mayor is appointing, but we got to look at what we're trying to resolve. You know, we can either make it a quick, long thing. I ain't gonna say real quick, but we don't need to add no more time to it. That's what I should say. Because I've been dealing with this racial profiling stuff for about the last 5-6 years. I had talked to Mike Beasley about it when Anthony Cobb was with the Urbana Police. I've talked about it. I haven't that much contact with Conley, but the door is open. But me and Durrell went in and talked to Conley when he first got elected to chief. So I'm just looking at who are we going to appoint and what we're trying to get from it. And I'm thinking the people that brought it ought to be some of the people that will be elected. And I wish the council could, I don't know if you can influence the mayor, but look at that to make that happen for the community. And I think that we could set examples, not just for Champaign. You know, if Urbana does it, Champaign would have to do it too, because I've been talking to Champaign about it, University Police about it, even the sheriff department about the racial profiling in Champaign. So if the Urbana take the right lead, I think the other ones have to look at it, and we could not only be a model for this city in this state, we could be a model for the country. Thank you.
Mr. Miller, just so you know that in section 3 it says that applications will be received through February 2014 and the task force will be appointed in March 2014. Our usual process of there's an application form on the web, and if you can't get it on the web, ask for a copy from the clerk, but we will be taking applications as we do with all our boards and commissions.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, James Kilgore.
Good evening, James Kilgore, 511 South Draper, Champaign. I would like to also speak to the same issue that Martell raised, and that's the question of the composition of what maybe I might call, from my own experience, the Traffic Justice Task Force. I want to speak to that membership in terms of my own participation in the Community Justice Task Force of the County of Champaign, which I worked with for almost 2 years and was set up with the express purpose of looking at alternatives to building a $20 million jail in this county and finding ways to allocate funding to keep people out of jail rather than build new jail cells. And I think there's 2 important lessons that I'd like to share from that experience. The first is that the composition of that body was diverse in the sense that it represented different interests, different specializations, mental health, substance abuse, legal scholars, people like myself who represented formerly incarcerated people. There was a broad spectrum of backgrounds, but there was a unity of purpose and understanding. That is, no one came to that task force with the idea that they wanted to build a jail. They came with the idea that alternatives to incarceration were a priority. So we didn't have to debate the fundamentals. So I think it's very important that in terms of this traffic task force, that people who are put on this don't come with an agenda of trying to disprove the fact that there's racial disparity in traffic stops in Urbana. There's plenty of data to show that there is. And if the task force is going to argue that back and forth, it's going to get nowhere. What's needed is people who can recognize that there's a problem and work together to come up with a solution. Now, the second point I want to make is the question of the racial composition of the task force. And the Community Justice Task Force almost imploded because of a lack of diversity. And in fact, there were some people within the task force who wanted to insist that the enormous racial disparities in the county jail population were beyond the purview of the Community Justice Task Force. And that conflict became so serious that we actually had a delegation of people from the African American community who came to one of our meetings and virtually disrupted the meeting and told the members of the task force that there was no way that they could investigate the criminal justice system in Champaign County without looking at the issues of racial disparity in the jail population. And there was a dialogue that went on for about an hour and a half outside the boundaries of the 5-minute limitations and so forth, where people from the African American community spelled out exactly what the experience of people in the African American community was with the criminal justice system and why no genuine task force could actually explore those issues without considering the issues of racial disparity and all the factors that contributed to that. So I'm just putting these things forward in order for the City Council to think very carefully about those factors when the composition of this board is put together, so that there are a considerable core of people that are dedicated to exploring the reasons behind the racial profiling that exists, and that there is a diversity there that's necessary in order to explore this issue with the legitimacy that's required. So I wish you the best of luck with your task force. I think the Community Justice Task Force played an important role in shifting the debate in criminal justice in Champaign County, and I hope that your task force can do even better.
You have
in terms
1
of
minute,
dealing
Mr.
with the
Kilgore.
issues that pertain to this task force. Thank you.
Question. Mr. Kilgore, question?
Yeah.
Eric.
Do you have any specific recommendations that, with reference to the application process for being on the task force, that would, help to ensure the that the kind of composition that you're talking about?
Well, I think there are some sort of recommendations that are quite often put for employment applications, for example, encouraging certain groups to apply. What constitutes an advantage for people who might be on this? So, for example, somebody that has a familiarity with the issues of racial profiling, of the traffic stops, the IDOT information, the debates that have been taking place within the Urbana City Council around these issues, that these things would be an advantage. I also think that there should be an encouragement of people, particularly from the African American community, to apply, because this is where the racial disparity is at work here, and I think there can also be some outreach done to try to solicit people from that community to apply. I don't think that's an illegitimate part of a sort of neutrality. It's not as if you're handing out a job that's paying $100,000 a year here. You're handing out a position where you want people to volunteer their time and make the best possible input. So I think you need to talk to people informally and encourage them to apply if they fit the needs of your task force.
Maybe I should read all of Section 3 just for the public's information. This is what it says. The task force shall be composed of 11 members. At least 2 members will have education and expertise in statistics. 1 council member may serve on the task force. Other members shall be chosen from applicants based upon their knowledge and understanding of sociology, law enforcement, or other relevant experience, and a demonstrated ability to be objective and respectful in dealing with people from other backgrounds, cultures, and opinions. Applicants are not required to live in the city of Urbana, but should be representative of the ethnic mix of Urbana. So that's what
Well, I mean, with all due respect to sociologists, I don't think the experience of being a sociologist should be valued over an experience and understanding of the criminal justice system. I mean, both firsthand experience and intellectual education experience. And I'm not quite sure what is meant by education there. I mean, there's a lot of ways to interpret that.
just as or other relevant experience. So I think
but see what's being. I mean, why do you? I mean, I don't understand, for example, why you prioritize getting somebody with a sociological background. I mean, this is not.
It's
Well, but
there's the word "or" is in there.
But that is a discipline that's specifically named, and I don't think that as being a sociologist as opposed to a political scientist, as opposed to a lifelong paralegal or community justice activist is going to make anybody any more effective.
Okay, well. Other questions? Thank you. Next up, Reverend Dr. Evelyn B. Underwood.
I really am a space holder. I was trying to hold a space for the NAACP, of which I'm a life member, and the Ministerial Alliance of Champaign-Urbana and vicinity, of which the Ministerial Alliance is one of the organizations that signed on. But I know there's a lot of meetings going on, very important meetings that I should have been at. Attending, but I thought this was the most important one, so I guess people had to make decisions. That's why a lot of people are not here, and there are many, many more people who are more qualified to speak than I. So given that I'm a space holder, and I see the NAACP is here, so I make it quick.
Dr. Underwood,
Yes.
we did receive an email with the document from
The
Trish Avery.
Ministerial
Yes.
Alliance?
No, from Trish Avery.
Okay.
The president of the NAACP.
Yeah, but I see the legal person, not the legal person. Mr. James, you are what now? Political
Okay.
chair.
Oh,
So
okay.
he's here. So I felt good when I saw him.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Ministerial Alliance, I don't know if they are coming. But anyway, I'm just saying why I'm the space holder. So I hadn't planned to speak, but I felt I should hold a space. But I do have a few things that I can say. We have to be very careful about control, and I think I spoke of control before to this council when there are positions to be held, and the council and the mayor are doing the choosing. I get kind of queasy because of the control problem. Racial composition is important to me also, and to some of the people that I've been talking to about this. Ban the box, so I guess there might not be a box, but I would like to see some people with firsthand experience with the criminal justice system on this committee, and we have some very, very intelligent people who might fit that education requirement, but might not necessarily have degrees from a university. Also, I wanted to say about the sociologists and statistician. Did I say it right? It's important maybe to have someone, but we can always get someone from the university. We have a premier university here, and it wouldn't necessarily be important to have those kind of people We can, but we have the University of Illinois here, and we can always pull some people in from the University of Illinois. And I say that because it's a land grant institution, 3 components, and public service is one. And we never should forget that, and we do. So, thank you.
Questions of Dr. Underwood? Okay, next up, thank you.
Oh, I thought you said.
Yeah, thank you. Next up, Artis James, representing the NAACP.
Hello, everyone. My name is Artis James. I live on Copper Tree Road in Champaign, Illinois. I'm here today in support of the letter that was sent to the Banner City Council from the NAACP. We were asking your consideration of language change in that Section 3, and we would like to change. We would like the language change to include a minimum of 4 members from the petitioner committee. I think part of the language change that Patricia Avery wrote to you guys was the task force shall be composed of 11 members, 1 city council member, 1 member of the Banner Police Department, a minimum of 4 members from the petitioning committee organization, and a minimum of 4 members from the community at large. And of course, the chief of police or his designee. So I'm just here to ask that you guys consider that change so make it more specific. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you. Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Discussion. Dennis.
Mostly, I'm very strongly supportive of this process and having a task force here. I guess what I'd like to ask the other members of the council would be, there is a recommendation that a representative from the police department also be serving on the task force. It's not specifically indicated here. Although it does say law enforcement or relevant experience, it doesn't specifically indicate that the police department will be represented in particular. Chief Conley is open to that and probably appreciate it, and I'm just wondering if we want to add that recommendation to the document. I guess so I'd make a motion that we consider it.
Is there a second? Dan?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to amend this to include that one of the 11 members be the chief of police, or I believe the police or designee.
Or designee.
Or designee. Discussion. Carol.
I think it's a good idea because the original recommendation that I sent to Bill included that, and then the mayor didn't think that that was a good use of the time at that point, and then recommended that that was not included, that we would get support for the task force from the staff of the HRC. So I'm in support of, I believe that that is critical for the committee to have access, certainly to the police department, because the data is going to come from them and the communication needs to come from them. So if we're going full circle, I support the recommendation. I also want to, if I could speak to some of the other issues on here, or do you want to come back? Okay, that's fine.
Okay, any further discussion on this, Eric?
So I guess I'm a little concerned in general about laying a lot of particular specifications on the composition of the committee before we really have a chance to look at the individuals. Mm-hmm. I think that I would be astonished if the council, with respect to this particular set of nominations, behaved anything like a rubber stamp to the mayor, because this issue is so, well, it's so important. Mm-hmm. It's both important and it requires really a lot of thought, really, at that stage. So my personal preference would be to defer further specification of the composition of the, trying to define categories for the committee until I think many of us will probably express opinions to the mayor about people who we think, would really be good. And I'm sure that the mayor will receive a lot of input from the public, and we're going to have a chance to look hard at the nominations that the mayor puts forth. So I'd like to my preference would be, I'm not strongly opposed to this motion. If it comes to a vote, I'm going to vote no, but it's not because I think there shouldn't be a person representing the police force on this committee, but because a broader principle that I think that I think it would be better not to specify the composition of the committee at this time, but to look at individuals who apply or might be encouraged to apply, and see how that see what can emerge from there.
Bill.
Yeah, I don't have strong feelings on that issue either. I think I had talked about one member, maybe like the police, the dog officer, I forgot his name already, or somebody like that could shed light on how procedures are done when you do a search. I would expect that over the year you would probably, if you were on the task force, want to meet with several different officers to understand, to get more than one perspective, for one thing, for more than one officer, but also to understand different procedures from different perspectives. But yeah, I guess I'm kind of with Eric. I don't have a real strong opinion, but I think I would tend to vote yes, so I might cancel you out.
That's fine.
Others. All this, Dennis.
Yeah, one more. Well, I mean, it has been requested as one of the perhaps I suppose as a reference, a person who has expertise. Maybe it's useful to have such a person on the task force. Of course, an 11-person task force, it means that one less community group or member would represent beyond the task force. So you'd actually be changing out the representation somewhat by that, the limitation of how many people are going to be composing of the entire force of people are going to be on this task force. So that's plus and minus. But if the chief is willing to have a representative on the force to offer clarity and guidance over some of the topics as they're being reviewed, it might be a huge help to the members. So I guess I'll support it.
Further discussion? All those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, that amendment passes. Okay. Further discussion? Carol?
First off, certainly I want to take the time to applaud the City Council for working on this issue so diligently over the last several weeks. It's not easy to deal with social justice issues of this magnitude, and certainly we wouldn't even be having this discussion if it wasn't for the critical legislation that allowed for the collection of the data in the first place, which hadn't been done prior to 2003. And so we're in this position because so much progress has been made, but we haven't done nearly the progress that we will do by putting a task force in place to start looking more deeply into the disparity itself. As for the resolution, I only have a couple issues with the language of the resolution. One of them is I have a question about this particular statement that I can't answer myself. It says for additional, under Section 2, it says for additional social context, the task force will consider the experience of traffic stops from the perspective of minority drivers. But it doesn't say how. How would that be done? And so I'm not certain what the insertion here is. If you don't have the previous sentence, it doesn't actually have any relevance in this document. And I like, for the purpose of discussion, to understand how that would be done in this point.
I could try to answer that because I put that in there. I guess there was concern with the sentence before that, as far as procedures that might encourage people to target a specific officer, specific police officer, because there are established procedures for filing complaints, and we wanted to avoid encouraging that kind of direction. So I thought, for additional social context, the task force will consider the experience of traffic stops from the perspective of minority drivers would mean that however you need to do that, if you are a minority driver, you might not have to do as much work as somebody who's not a minority driver. If you aren't a minority driver, you'd probably have to talk to other people and do the normal things that people do when you try to put yourself in the position to see something from another perspective. So I left it open on purpose, I think, to leave it up to the individual to do whatever they have to do to make that thought process.
Bill, do you mean leave it up to the committee to?
No, leave it up to each individual. Whatever the individual
Okay.
has to do in order to consider the experience from the perspective of the minority is what that individual should do.
Thank you. And then Carol, want to continue then?
If I could, I'll continue with these, and then I'll come back after others weigh in. So that leaves a little concern for me there. Okay, so I'll just put a pin in that one for a second. And in Section 3, there's also a sentence that says, starts with demonstrated ability to be objective and respectful in dealing with people from other backgrounds, cultures, and opinions. I think the sentence itself actually should be stricken. So I like that sentence stricken because it in itself is not objective. Who makes the determination as to whether the person has demonstrated ability to be objective and respectful? That's even more concerning when you use the term respectful. To one community, it may mean one thing, and to another, it may mean something totally different. And so the language itself is objective, and it should be taken out. And then my final comment, I have no concerns with Section 5 with the mayor certainly being included in the task force, submitting questions to the task force. I think that's appropriate. But I do have concern about, again, having an independent committee that works on that, and therefore the independency can come from the committee after they've been appointed by the mayor and this council, where they have the autonomy to select their own chair to drive their work. I think that is really important in this, and that is something I've added in the beginning of this conversation, that even though the mayor has the appointment power, we do want to leave some autonomy for there to be a little space for the committee to select its chair and really drive the task force. As what was expressed in the public participation and from my own experience, the chair is so critical to the matter that if you have a person who comes with their own either guilty or not guilty verdicts, right, it makes it very difficult. Or if the person who has the power dynamic in this situation selects the chair, the person who's the chair may also feel some allegiance to the person who's selected them. And so I believe that you really want to have independence. You appoint the committee, you allow the committee to select their own chair from among its members, and those are the recommendations that I'll put forward at this point.
Others? Eric.
So I'll just speak to a couple of those points. One is the the issue of the sentence that begins for additional social context and then goes on, the task force will consider the experience of traffic stops from the perspective of minority drivers. I believe, and Bill, you should correct me if I'm wrong because I think you actually crafted the sentence, that the committee may choose any means. It could be individuals on the committee may consider that experience, but also the committee as a whole may elect or, any procedure that it chooses to do this as a committee. So I don't think the committee is in any sense limited, except that the sentence does mandate that be part of what the committee considers, because the word will is very strong. With respect to the selection of the chair, I think as a procedural thing, that's just how city commissions and committees are done. Now, I think actually an important issue is that the mayor will really nominate a chair. The council must approve that selection. So I think that is appropriate. I think that we should take that responsibility to consider very carefully whatever nomination the mayor makes, and not to be a rubber stamp. But I think that's our responsibility, and it's just the way that city commissions are done, and I think we should accept that responsibility.
Bill.
I just had a couple comments. One on the suggestion from NAACP and the original suggestion actually to include specific members from specific groups. Originally I thought that was a pretty good idea, but then after considering that there were probably a lot of groups that weren't approached with the petition that would have signed the petition, I think the Ministerial Alliance kind of signed on at the last moment because they happened to be here. There was people from if there had been someone here from their neighborhood group, I'm sure they would have signed on the immigration forum. A lot of other social justice groups, if they were given the opportunity, I think would have signed on. So it does seem a little restrictive to say that 4 members have to come from these 4 or 5 or 6 groups, however many there were in the end that signed on. And so I hope that, at least 4 members will come from groups like that, and I would expect them to, and I probably wouldn't vote for a whole slate of candidates if none of them did, or if only 2 of them did, or something like that. So I don't think that would be a big issue. As far as the selection of the chair, there are a couple of commissions where they choose their own chair. The Historic Preservation Commission chooses their own chair and vice chair, and the Library Board, which is a little bit different. But other than that, I think the chair is selected by the mayor. I see advantages and disadvantages both ways, really. If the mayor, if you appoint everybody to the committee and feel comfortable with all of them being chair, that's one solution. But if you want to appoint somebody to the committee where maybe the mayor might not be comfortable with that person being a chair, maybe it's better that she is allowed to pick a chair that's someone else, because then you can get that person on the committee. So I could go either way with that, but I'm okay with, I think, the mayor picking the chair.
Diane?
I support the mayor's ability to select the chair. I also agree with Eric that the council has a big responsibility when it comes to approving that selection, as we have a responsibility in making sure we get a wide variety of people on this committee. We have a very, very rich community in terms of our expertise and our experience, and I expect we'll get a very, very high quality membership on this task force. And personally, for me, I think we could debate the language in this resolution for the next 6 months because we're very good at talking about things like this. But I would just as soon we pass this and then get on to the task at hand, which is getting to the truth here. And so I'm fully prepared to accept this resolution as amended to include the chief of police or a designee in this.
I would like to point out that this is missing some language that Kurt suggested earlier. I know it's in Bill's version of this. Bill, could you read that last part and let's get an amendment and just get this amended to include that, please?
Okay.
And then I'll get back to you.
For legal sufficiency, I will move that we add the language passed by the City Council this blank day of, well, should I fill in the blanks? What's today?
No, you just leave it under.
Passed by the City Council this blank day of blank 2014. Ayes, nays, abstained. Then a signature block for Phyllis Clark. And then approved by the mayor this blank day of blank 2014 and a signature block for the mayor.
Yeah. The clerk tells me that's pretty automatic, but I do want to include it. So that's in there automatic. Is that correct? Okay, so that part's in there automatically. People should understand that. Okay. Carol?
Some of these may not seem important at this point, and I may even concede some of them. But I'd like to make a motion to strike, put a period after relevant experience, and strike the remaining part of the sentence, and a demonstrated ability to be objective and respectful in dealing with people from other backgrounds, culture, and opinions. And I'll make a statement as to why I want to strike that, and then you can vote on it as you will.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? That motion dies for lack of a second.
Mr. Chair, I motion to reconsider, and I'll speak to it before I put it on the floor again. The reason why this task force is before you is because there was a demonstrated disparity in traffic stops. That demonstrated disparity also resulted in a demonstrated economic impact in the African American community. Some $3 million in traffic fees and fines have been paid over this same period of time to the Champaign County Courthouse in relationship to the traffic stops, that some of which we have not determined what the reasons for those are, hence the traffic stop study. In this language itself is subjective and can be considered offensive to some communities. I find it to be inappropriate in the usage of the word objective and respectful. Some in the community may not find that we've been objective and respectful based on their perception of what that means to them. And because we have different cultural values, ethnic, and experiences, that can be interpreted in many, many ways. And so that is the reason why I'm asking for this council to reconsider, again, the language that says demonstrated ability to be objective and respectful in dealing with people from other backgrounds, cultures, and opinions. And I would make that motion again, motion to reconsider.
I'd second.
It's been moved and seconded. I was going to offer a suggestion here that may get us through this. How about if it said, you put a period after relevant experience, and then you simply said, applicants are expected to be objective and respectful in dealing with people from other backgrounds, cultures, and opinions. Because I think that's what this is after.
I think it reflects, unfortunately, the perspective of the appointing member.
Yeah. So,
unfortunately, because the task force was not a foregone conclusion and it hadn't existed before, and it hasn't come very easily either, I think that again speaks to the subjectiveness of the sentence itself.
Who was next? Was it Eric or Dennis?
I don't know.
Eric?
So, Carol, I think I'm starting to figure out where you're coming from here, and I wonder if it would be a friendly amendment to replace "to be objective and respectful in dealing with people from other backgrounds and opinions," to replace that with "demonstrated ability to listen carefully to people from other backgrounds, cultures, and opinions."
I think, again, if we try to quantify it, it is still becoming a subjective sentence, meaning I get to determine whether I find that person to be objective or respectful,
Well, right.
depending on how they.
Yeah, so I'm saying, yes, I think I agree with you to strike that language. What I'm suggesting is to replace the language of being objective and respectful to saying should have the ability to listen carefully to people of other backgrounds, cultures, and opinions.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you, but I think one of my favorite English professors is in this room. And if I were to ask him in the proper usage of language, he would probably say, even with the term listening, it also could be subjective. I'm listening to you, but because I may not agree with you, the person could interpret, my husband may interpret that I'm not listening if I don't follow or agree with what he's saying. And so I'm concerned about that being the criterion. I think anything that is subjective in this resolution can be interpreted in so many ways. And I've been, in many cases, in situations where I've tried to explain through, I can look up the words, some of these words in a dictionary, and it would probably cause more confusion and trouble for us. I think in this case, it really needs to simply be stricken, and I'll go and move forward on the resolution.
Dennis, did you?
Well, okay, I was just thinking that certainly we'd want our applicants to have shown by a word or deed that they respect the diverse cultures, backgrounds, in the community. I don't think we could be very that would be misleading. Maybe you're concerned about the word opinions.
No.
I think if we appointed them, they are already qualified candidates if we appointed them. And I think that itself speaks to their ability to serve.
Let's try to wrap this up. Eric.
I think what has brought me around to Carol's way of thinking on these two words is that these words are words that are used to put people down. You're not being objective. You're not showing respect. And so I think that's certainly not the intention as this was drafted, but there is a context where those words can be very pejorative. I guess I feel differently about saying to somebody, "You're not listening." That doesn't mean that I'm putting them down. It just means that I'm trying and you're not hearing what I'm saying. But I also am okay with striking the whole sentence if because I do believe that there are contexts where the language that's in there could be seen as loaded.
Dan.
In the interest of moving this forward, I would say, yes, let's end that sentence after the word experience. And we just are going to expect and assume that people are objective and respectful in this process going forward. But again, we're getting hung up on
semantics.
a sentence here. And the overall task is to get to the bottom of this and look at the issue of traffic stops.
Okay, all those in favor? All those in favor of the amendment?
I'll second that amendment.
It's already been seconded.
Okay.
All those in favor of the amendment, striking this language?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's struck.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The resolution passes. Thank you. Okay, next up is reports of standing committee. Eric, would you please take that? Here. Right.
Thank you. Okay, so I am substituting for Charlie because Charlie is substituting for Laurel, and I'm next in line to chair the committee of the whole, although I won't be here next Monday to do it. But anyway, on behalf of the committee of the whole, I present ordinance number 2013-12-106, an ordinance annexing certain territory to the city of Urbana, 2911 East Anthony Drive. And on behalf of the committee, I move approval.
It's been moved by Eric, seconded by Carol. Discussion. Seeing none. Michael?
Well, I'm not going to drag this out, but I mean, I think you guys all understand where I'm coming from on this. I think this is, there were numerous ways that were discussed that could have alleviated the financial burden on these folks. That would not have compromised the ability of the city to annex the territory either now or at a later date. So for those reasons, I will be voting in opposition to this annexation as well as the ensuing annexations of East Anthony.
Further discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
No.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes. Motion carries.
On behalf of the committee of the whole, I move approval of ordinance number 2014-01-001, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance to reflect donations to the fire department.
Second.
Moved by Eric, seconded by Michael. Discussion. All those in favor, or would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes. Motion carries. Next.
On behalf of the committee of the whole, I move approval of ordinance number 2014-01-002, an ordinance vacating a portion of the Guardian West Drive cul-de-sac.
I'll second.
Moved by Eric, seconded by Dennis. Discussion. Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes. Motion carries. Next.
On behalf of the committee of the whole, I move approval of ordinance number 2014-01-003, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance fiscal year 2013-2014, Main Street, Cedar Street to Vine Street.
I'll second.
Moved by Eric, seconded by Dennis. Discussion. Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
On behalf of the committee of the whole, I move approval of resolution number 2014-01-001R, resolution for improvement by municipality under the Illinois Highway Code, 2014 miscellaneous street reconstruction.
I'll second.
Moved by Eric, seconded by Carol. Discussion. Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes. Motion carries. Next.
On behalf of the committee of the whole, I move approval of ordinance number 2014-01-004, an ordinance repealing Urbana City Code Chapter 20 titled Streets, Sidewalks, and Other Public Places, and establishing a new Chapter 20 titled Public Right-of-Way and Other Public Places.
Second.
Moved by Eric, seconded by Diane. I will note that we did receive a memo from Brad Bennett, Engineering, answering a number of questions. So I don't know if there are any further questions for Bill.
No.
Okay. Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes, motion carries.
On behalf of the...
Hold on.
Mr. Mayor,
Oh.
as a liquor license holder in the city of Urbana, I will recuse myself from the remainder of the meeting. So you guys have a good night.
Okay. Do we have any reports of special committees or anything? Okay, I don't think there'll be any further business after these 5. Good night, Mike.
So it's not so often that being in business on your own actually saves you a few minutes. So,
Okay. Item G.
on behalf of the Committee of the Whole, I move approval of ordinance number 2014-01-005, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Chapter 3, Section 3-43, increasing the number of Class R1 liquor licenses for Uncle Martin Incorporated, 1104 North Cunningham Avenue.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Eric, seconded by Dennis. Is there further discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes. Okay, motion carries. Next.
On behalf of the Committee of the Whole, I move approval of ordinance number 2014-01-006, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Chapter 3, Section 3-43, increasing number of Class R2 liquor licenses for Urbana Gardens Restaurant Incorporated, 810 Killarney Street.
I'll second.
Been moved by Eric, seconded by Dennis. Discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes. Next.
On
Motion
behalf-
carries.
On behalf of the Committee of the Whole, I move approval of ordinance number 2014-01-007, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Chapter 3, Section 343, increasing number of Class BBB liquor licenses for OMSI, LLC, DBA Urbana Mini Mart, 1701 South Philo Road.
I'll second.
Second.
Moved by Eric, seconded by Dennis. Discussion. Diane.
Because there was some concern expressed about this last week, and I've had a couple of emails, I wanted to clarify to the public that this is simply a change in the type of license that this established business holds. They're going from a Class B license, which is a beer-only license, to a Class BBB license, which allows for the retail sale of beer and wine to be consumed off premises only. So it is not a new license, it is not a new store locating along Philo Road. It's a change in the classification for an existing business.
Further discussion. Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes, motion carries.
On behalf of the Committee of the Whole, I move approval of ordinance number 2014-01-008, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Chapter 3, Section 343, increasing number of Class R1 liquor licenses for Black Rock Pizza Company, LLC, 142 Lincoln Square.
I'll second.
Moved by Eric, seconded by Dennis. Discussion. Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes, motion carries. Next.
On behalf of Committee of the Whole, I move approval of ordinance number 2014-01-009, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Chapter 3, Section 343, increasing number of Class C liquor licenses for T&R Food Mark DBA Urbana Food and Liquor, 1509 East Washington Street.
I'll second.
Moved by Eric, seconded by Dennis. Discussion. Diane, then Dennis.
Go ahead.
Again, just to clarify this license, because there was concern expressed about it last week, and I've had a couple of emails. 1509 Washington has had a bit of is a location that has had a checkered history. A couple of owners before this ran into problems. Their liquor license was revoked by the city because they were arrested for selling drugs and drug paraphernalia. The operators the store transferred to a different operator. They received a new liquor license. And I was just reminded by our Assistant City Attorney tonight that a condition of that new liquor license is that a safety plan developed by the police department was put into effect, and it is in effect for 5 years, from June of 2012 through June of 2017. So any liquor license at this location automatically has this safety plan attached to it. And just for the public's interest, because it has been a couple of years since we put that into effect, the safety plan, if I can find it, is very thoughtful and very proactive. It covers things like no abandoned vehicles, pallets, or other items can be stored around the building. Loitering is not allowed. No selling of drug paraphernalia. One would think that would go without saying, but we said it anyway. No loitering inside or outside. There has to be fencing on the store on the back end. Lighting basically on the back, west, east, and front, so that's all sides of the building. The video must cover the front area along the entire front of the store, the east-west side of the store, front door, back door, and at the register. The owners are required to maintain the handicap parking spot. Again, something you would think that they would have done anyway, but we put that in writing. And the owners must report all criminal activity that they see occurring on the property. They can't allow anyone to freely commit criminal acts, and the events must be promptly reported to the police. If any of these above listed rules aren't followed, then the liquor license will be forfeited immediately. So we have very good proactive measures in place to make sure that this location is a productive and contributing part of the city, and the past year I think has been pretty calm as far as that particular location. But again, this license is a Class C license. It permits the licensee to sell at retail liquors in package only, no on-premises consumption. So it's not a new license, it's not an additional license, it's simply a new applicant who has passed the necessary background checks to receive this license. So I'm supportive of issuing the license at this location, given the fact we have this plan in place, and we're certainly, monitoring this location.
Dennis, then Carol.
Yeah, and I'd like to say that this topic was reviewed by the last meeting of the Learman Neighborhood Action Committee. It was felt that because this does not increase the number of liquor licenses in the neighborhood, but mainly maintains them, and that there had been sales at this location for many years, considering that the security plan still exists and is in place, there was no objection by that association to this approval.
Carol.
I want to certainly thank my communication with Diane. She forwarded that to me because I wasn't on the council when this took place. My initial objection was that we didn't have anything that spoke to some of those issues, but because we do, I'll support this tonight. And I also appreciate the police department taking the steps to put something else that maybe possibly don't normally happen, but under these circumstances really needed to take place. And so I will support this final issuance for tonight.
Further discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you, Eric. Are there any reports of special committees? Seeing none. Reports of officers? There's no new business, so this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Very well done.